Welcome to the future, and welcome back to Idea Supply Chain, where we take a look at where ideas come from and what makes those ideas valuable. I mentioned earlier this year that I'm in the process of speedrunning the economy, and I wanted to give an update on that because if you look at it from an outside perspective, I have done absolutely nothing. And if I'm going to claim that I'm going to speedrun the economy in a given calendar year, one would expect that by the end of the year, I would have something, you know, tangible and money-like in my hands. Um, right now, I currently have a liquidity status of like $40, a liquid net worth, I guess. So part of this is I'm figuring out what the hell finances actually need in order to be maintained. Because while I've been working on speedrunning the economy, I've been paying attention specifically to all of the problems that I've seen, and I've been documenting them and digging into them and understanding them. Um, this is different from the typical AI approach of just building shit, getting a bunch of users, and then trying to learn as much as you can through the AI and hope that you're on the right track. I tend to take a much different route because I realized the key issue with AI systems isn't the model, it's where the model's used, the network in which it's used. And so this is something that I got into with some of my research around intelligence being a function of networks, not individuals. So, all of this being said, I actually have had a very interesting past few weeks, and it has given me incredible insights into the workings of the economy. And so now we're going to start taking a daily ride on the speed run. We're gonna strap into the roller coaster, and we're about to start climbing this mountain. Um, I've got all the chains hooked up that are going to pull us up this roller coaster, um, up to the top, because once we start going down, that's really when things are no longer in our control. And that's one of the fun things about economics and how we value the people around us in the networks. And it's all based off of whether or not we can understand the information that we're getting from them and how well we're able to use that. Now, let's actually dig into a few things here. So, one of the concepts that I've really focused in on is this concept of time violence. It landed to me as the perfect way to describe what's happening, where a system is treating one person's time as valuable and another person's time is not valuable. And so this allows you to basically say that my time is more valuable than your time because I'm the designer of the system, and therefore being the designer of the system gives me the advantage in using the system. This is actually really bad system design because of the energy required to make predictions about the future. Now, this all comes down to physics. And in fact, I have a new catchphrase that I've been throwing out with a friend of mine, and it's really starting to stick. So, when in doubt, remember physics, bitches, because ultimately it all comes down to physics and specifically entropy. We're trying to contain entropy because when a system grows unbound, entropy grows unbound and complexity grows unbound. And this means that as a given system grows, it requires more and more energy in order to collapse that entropy, to turn the unknown into known. And this is really at the heart of what consciousness is. So we're trying to map the patterns that we see, um, and share those so that we can build on top of the same conscious patterns. And when I started exploring these ideas through time, I realized that all of this existed in the Renaissance, and they called it the Bottega. And it was this nice, simple model that actually just did everything that I was trying to do through AI systems. So I'm bringing the Bottega back, Um, that might be a bit like bringing Backstreet back. I'm not 100% on that, exactly where that fits into the analogy writing, but we'll figure that out later. So the idea is that we need to bring the Bottega back and we need to have conscious markets. Now, let's walk through what a conscious market is. And so basically, what we're doing is we are understanding that information in the system is growing. This is obvious from anybody who's been involved in AI because the speed of advancement in AI is so fucking fast that nobody can keep up with anything. Cool. So we are all very sure on what's uncertain, and that is the rate of growth of the future because all sorts of shit's happen. Um, Also, we need to decide what's reversible and what's not reversible because, frankly, the idea of saying that something is non-reversible and then trying to reverse it is a big reason that the economy is the way it is today. And it's that way because basically everybody's making all sorts of promises. Nobody's actually delivering on any of them. And then we create this incredibly low trust environment where everybody's trying to do chargebacks and clawbacks and whatever the fuck backs, right? Everybody wants their money back because nobody's getting what they expected, and everybody's trying to make giant choices with very limited money and ability to actually take the consequences of those decisions and move forward with them. And so what we want to do here is we want to create a market that actually says like, hey, you know what? Look, we understand that there's some unknown in this, but hey, we're going to agree that this is at least going to stay on the record as something to build from because we don't want to introduce new complexity to it once it's been simplified. That is a waste of time, energy, etc. So we have this very specific definition of a conscious market. So we agree, like everybody involved agrees on what is unknown, what's uncertain. Um, Once the transaction crosses the system boundary, it's not reversible anymore. So there's a point of no return, and that is a very specific set point that we agree on. We run transactions along measured trust gradients because basically we want to make sure that when we say it's non-reversible, it's really non-reversible. And the best way to ensure that is to use trust-based networks because that's how humans already do this stuff. Also, we want to understand very specifically where the context boundary is. AI systems have increasing global context and decreasing local context. As the rate of change increases outside of your personal bubble, um, you need to pay more and more attention to the stability in your local context. This is why I've been talking about the fact that all of these global AI providers, tech companies are all going to start basically going away from the forefront, and we're going to see a lot more local, small, focused data companies at that local level to basically maintain local context as close to the edge as possible. So, and basically, let's actually talk about time bounds for a minute because I did a bit of work into figuring out what this actually meant. And basically, as I was doing this research, I realized that people who are dealing with all of this stupid complexity that we have to fucking deal with are the people who are being hurt by it the most. And so the people who have the most time violence inflicted upon them are actually the ones who have the most leverage against the system because basically you understand where the system is pretending it's valuable, but it's not. And this is a huge arbitrage opportunity. So basically, there's an understanding of what's valuable and what's not that the market doesn't have right now because basically the market is currently pricing complexity inflation as a signal of value, and that is all about to go away with AI. Systems do not become more valuable when they become more complex, they become less valuable. And we're about to see that because AI is going to eat all of that complexity for lunch and spit it out. And so any margin that exists in this complexity band is going to simply just disappear. So I realized that I needed to start a hedge fund, but I also realized that I have no idea what the fuck a hedge fund is or how to use it, to how to be a hedge fund. So anyway, I applied via a newsletter to Jim O'Shaughnessy and O'Shaughnessy Ventures because I really admire everything that they're doing there. And actually, Jim was able to come back with me with some really helpful feedback on what my model needed. And so this actually gave us a formula for time violence. And so we can go ahead and pull up this. And so basically, for time violence specifically, there are two specific pieces that we have to deal with. There's the operations score, and this is like how much time you just have to spend dealing with a system. Um, and this is based off of Kingman's formula, which is something that Jim was able to show me as a normal model for understanding how some of these types of systems are judged in the hedge fund world, right? And so basically what it does is it looks at the length of time that will be spent in a given queue based off the like variance of like how much the system is under load, like so how close to capacity is it, and then like the variance on um like when people are arriving and like whether or not they can basically adapt to that well. And if we look at like healthcare, it's honestly absurd because like basically everything is operating with maximal variance and at maximum operating capacity all the time because that's what the system is designed for. It's designed to inflict complexity upon us and make that as expensive as possible. So the other side of this is actually based in information theory, and it's about the amount of complexity that you have to figure out when you're working with a given system. And so, like in healthcare and insurance, right? Like, oh, we're going to give you 17 different forms, and you're going to be expected to navigate all of these. And so basically, like, this ends up being just absolutely insanely complex. And so what we can do is this gives us actually a really interesting metric for being able to evaluate what companies are committing violence versus people and what companies are reducing violence. And with this whole conscious markets thesis, I'm basing this whole idea on the fact that like as AI improves, time violence will necessarily go down because there's absolutely no market incentive for it to remain because any time violence that remains is an arbitrage opportunity. And so, like, again, the time violence framework right here creates a mechanism for transforming victims into intelligence assets who can arbitrage their own suffering. And this is going to be important for the hedge fund aspect of it. And if we go ahead and go back to Idea Nexus Ventures here, this is where I'm starting to outline how I am figuring out the hedge fund piece. And so I actually realized that Open Door has a remarkably good setup in terms of current market position. They just brought in a new CEO. They brought in some like the previous founders to the board, and basically they're going AI first. And so I worked with Claude to figure out what a bet that would make sense based off of the conscious market framework would look like. And so how I set this up was basically I got 200 shares, and this is all paper trading because I'm poor. But I'm going to prove to the market that I am incredibly valuable and then let the market pay me back after the fact, which is pretty cool. So, yeah, so we'll just go ahead and start with like 200 shares of open. So this is the current price for a share of Open. Um, and that gives us a total here. And so what I'm doing is I'm actually uh creating like a short on October 31st for like $10 as a stock price. So basically what I expect is over time I expect the stock price to go up. Um, but I'm not expecting it to blow up to insane values. And in fact, I am limiting the maximum value I can take from here. Um, and so, like, if we look at this, so there is a very specific maximum profit I can make on this. And so this is like $516 from this. And this kind of basically, so I've got the options at $10. So if they're over $10, these get called away. I make a profit, but it's capped, right? If the stock jumps to $80, I just lost a shit ton of upside. But I'm okay with that. It's a consciousness play. And the whole thing is that I'm not going to be paying attention to the price of the stock after making the bet. I make the bet. I consider all the possible options, right? So this is what I'm looking at here. These are the possible option outcomes on that October 31st expiration. So here's the moderate win. So I'll make a few bucks. Cool. And then, we can basically get paid for being relatively certain that it's going to go up some amount. And we basically just collect a premium on that. And then maybe it just breaks even. Okay, cool, whatever. It's accurately priced, I guess, which means we don't really lose much and just kind of whatever. And then, like, okay, if the stock drops below like this amount, like we start losing money, but the chances of that are pretty limited, and it's not going to go to zero in a month. I mean, unless something crazy happens. But you know what? I'm not going to worry about that part. Like, there's a maximum possible loss of like $1,484, right? Um, but then I'm actually starting to like look at specific signals too, right? Um, and so like here's the kind of risk management that I'm setting up for this hedge funds situation. So I'm not gonna have regret. I'm not gonna have panic. I'm not gonna have FOMO, and I'm not gonna worry about closing early. Um, I'm looking to see where this comes, and the reason I picked open is actually something that jumped out to me. And I noted it here. Um, so Jane Street announced like a 6% stake in Open Door. Um, and so I noticed that on like the same day that Emmett Shear was on the Win-Win podcast with Liv Bory talking about organic alignment. And I wanted to connect um everything here, showing that kind of both of these events are coming to showcase the future from a specific lens. So um Jane Street is the quants, right? Like these are the mathematicians of the mathematicians. Um, and I basically predicted what they were going to do. And so I had posted about conscious markets. I actually even went so far as to showcase this on Reddit. Uh, and I tried to make some positions last week in Reddit to kind of showcase this and at least show to Jim at O'Shaughnessy Ventures that I had some idea of what was happening. By the way, if you notice, Accenture just laid off 1,000 people. So I'm not going to say I told you so, but I told you so, and it's going to keep getting crazier until it starts getting sane again. And that's what we are going to um, figure out. And so uh, this actually shows that um, Jane Street is recognizing that Open Door has an opportunity to collapse the time violence that takes place in the home buying process. Um, and so I think, Jane Street sees this, and I see this, and more people see this. So basically, like, I'm going to see that, traditional brokerages are going to evolve. We're going to see more quantitative players following Jane Street, um, because they're all going to converge on the same arbitrage opportunity, right? Like, I'm observing the same things that a bunch of other people are observing. I'm just giving very specific words to them that help me frame them in very universal concepts that most hedge funds aren't going to, because they're going to be too busy printing money hand over fist. Um, and this is like where we can actually see, Jane Street is already betting on consciousness. And markets are about to get way different than what we're used to. They're going to be um, conscious. And so over the past week, as I, had this model and I've started doing this, I've realized that we can actually even prove this at three different layers. So we can start at the thermodynamic foundation of it. Um, and so this is all based off of something called Landauer's principle, which is basically that to delete information from a system, there's a minimum cost of energy that you have to pay, no matter what. And so this means there's always an optimization problem in place, because you have to minimize the total energy expenditure for a given system. Um, and so this is like that absolute lowest level. Okay. Um, we need to, and so what we actually show here is we don't want to collapse a single bit in a superposition state until we absolutely have to, because once we collapse it, there is energy expanded into the system, and that is an irreversible process. So it cannot be reversed. And so if we can use consciousness to hold this bit in superposition until the optimal time of collapse, that's where things start to get interesting. Now, um, what we can do is we can actually build on this to say that, like, oh, for a system of, n bits, we need to minimize the total entropy through selective collapse. And this gives us the idea of like a conscious agent that can collapse a subset of bits um, in like the known and unknown states. And so we can look for the optimal collapse time based on like its correlation, the energy cost, and like the value of information gained. And so suddenly, if you're familiar with Maxwell's demon, if not, you should look it up. But basically, the conscious agent is Maxwell's demon here, trying to figure out where that line is. And so this shows us that consciousness acts as like an exclusive or state optimizer. So we're maintaining the valuable superpositions, while the ones that don't matter, we just collapse down and get rid of, right? And so from here, we can actually build into the understanding of like time violence, as entropy, right? So this unnecessary complexity over the baseline creates information that is like wasting energy to compute. And so what we can do is we could say that we can use consciousness to simply minimize the time violence, and therefore minimize the entropy of the entire system. And suddenly, now we're able to get to a place where, we've got any possible system. We've got, at the physical level, it's optimizing energy through like selective measurement. But then the computation level is optimizing information through these XOR operations that we've got. And the economic level operates through, complexity arbitrage, but it's all a strange loop. Like each level completes the others, and it creates an entirely recursive system. And so this tells us that for any system S, conscious agents have the ability to extract value through selective state collapse. Um, and so what this tells us is that no matter how much Silicon Valley tries to tell us that they're going to automate us away and replace us with AI agents, it's bullshit. And once we know it's bullshit, we could start building systems where it just doesn't try to make that part be true because it's not reality. But if you look, Silicon Valley is throwing a lot of money on the idea of like replacing AI workers. Now, this is again arbitrage opportunity. And so my goal with this YouTube channel and with my Reddit posts and with my blog is I'm going to point you to all of the places where the economy is going to be working one way and a bunch of people are going to be claiming it works a completely different way. And I'm going to make predictions that will show you exactly why I'm right and why they're wrong. Physics, bitches. And so this is the beautiful part of it. I don't have to rely on understanding what the hottest AI app is because I know where all of these apps are going to end up evolving. And so I'm simply just building in that space right now. And I'm also starting to help companies who are interested in where the future is actually heading. And so if this is something where you are interested in engaging in conscious markets, and if you're interested in getting rid of all the bullshit that doesn't matter, you're going to want to talk to me because I'm not going to tell you that you need bullshit. I'm not going to tell you that you should be working 80 hours a week to make a living. I'm going to tell you that you should try to minimize the amount of time you spend doing anything, because that shows that you actually understand the systems that you're operating in. And I'm going to help you create the maximum value for the minimal time and energy required, because physics, bitches. So anyway, I just wanted to share all of this because I've got some crazy shit going on. And I'm planning on using this to put together a public consulting proposal for the new CEO of Open Door. Because frankly, I want to buy a goddamn house. I have been renting for my entire career because frankly, the economy fucking kept me down. And I'm about to turn the tables on it because I have a fuck ton of debt. I've got a bachelor's degree in computer science, a master's degree in software engineering, and then half of a master's in something else, maybe management and information systems. I don't know. I started getting it during the pandemic and realized that, wow, I just keep racking up debt and trying to get ahead in the economy, and I'm not getting ahead in the economy, but I am gaining more debt to try to postpone the inevitable. And so now I'm sitting here with a credit score of like $630, a bank account of like $40, and a fucking mission to show the world exactly where the time violence is happening in the economy. And then we're going to flip that and we're going to arbitrage the shit out of it. And we're all going to fucking get rich because I am tired of being poor. I'm tired of not knowing how to pay for fucking healthcare. I'm tired of going to the doctor's office and not being able to use a lab in my doctor's office because it's a subcontracted lab. And actually, because of my insurance, the only way I can get covered lab work is to drive across town, fucking wait in line for 4 hours and get blood work done. No, fuck all of that. I am done with the bullshit. And it's time for the world to understand what time violence is and that it's fucking over. So stick with me. I'm going to take you on a ride this week. We're going to take a look at some really fucking crazy shit that's going down at the experimental edge of the economy. And then we're going to ride this wave into building a new economy by Christmas. And we're going to fucking speed run the economy together. So if you're with me, fucking drop a note in the comments. Let me hear it. Because the economy is fucking broken. So we're going to burn it all down and replace it with something maybe a little more conscious. That's it for today. Let me know what you think. And I'll see you tomorrow with some crazy new shit that you weren't even imagining.